we were engaging a lesson that was asking you, why should you study cinematography? And we were mentioning how it impacts you, the positive and negative cultural aspects of cinematography. And then we had a little bit of time to go over the different benefits that you can obtain from studying cinematography. You were supposed to choose one of those benefits and write an essay and send it. Okay. Today, I'm going to announce that you have no homework because today's lesson will be prolonged, spaced out for 2 days. That means that we will not have time to finish this lesson today. We're going to begin covering it. We'll cover half of it, and next Friday, which is our next meeting, we should be concluding the lesson, and then you will have an assessment at the end that you will be working on and sending to me as a PDF attachment through email. I want to remind you that you should not share with me your work through Google Drive or OneDrive because that just complicates matters. So I accept no sharing. If you shared, I'm going to be asking you not to share and send a PDF attachment. Okay? All right. Any questions about that? Any doubts about that? It's all clear. Okay, fantastic. So, what is cinematography? Uh, Many people have different ideas of what cinematography is. Uh, and cinematography is a very complicated thing. It is made up of many different parts. Question some people ask, is it an art? Is it a science? Is it something more? So let us begin defining what is cinematography. If we look at the word from an etymological point of view, when I say etymological, it means what the different sounds or particles of the word mean, because the word cinematography is a compound word. It's made up of two Greek particles, kinema, or cinema, kinema, and graphe or graphene. Kinema, or the word kinetic in English, means movement. It is possible that when you were studying science and you were studying physical sciences, they were talking about the different types of energy. They mentioned kinetic energy. And kinetic comes from the Greek word kinema, and it means movement. The other word, graphene or graphy, means to record. So when we look at what from etymologically the word means, the word cinematography, it means recording movement. So when you're engaging cinematography and you're looking at what the meaning of the word, it means to record movement, but it's much more than that. The definition of cinematography is much more complicated than that. But that gives you an idea of what to look for when you're in the study of cinematography. Fundamentally, I mean, you are recording movement. Uh, Notice that uh, in addition to that, we can give you another definition. I would define cinematography as the art or technique or science of movie photography, including both the shooting and development of the film. So notice that I said technique, but I also inserted the word science. So cinematography is two things. It's more than two things. It's actually three things. Because the other earlier we were asking the question, is it something more than that? And cinematography is also a language. But we're going to talk about that in a second. So when you approach cinematography, you can approach cinematography as an art. And you can also approach it as a science or technique. And you can also approach it as a language. So you're seeing that cinematography is complex. It's very complex. When we approach it as an art, It is subjective and personal as an art form. All arts are subjective and personal. They are very dependent on innate talents and personal preferences. For example, you hear many people that sing, and some of them sing well. And they sing well because they had an innate talent for singing. They were born with that. No one taught them how to. So when we talk about art, we're talking about talent, innate talent. So that's something that you either have it or you don't have it. Um, when we approach cinematography as an art form and we engage this personal subjectivity, it can be used to bring out emotions and mood of different scenes and communicate a range of ideas and feelings to the viewer. So, have you ever seen little children acting? How many of you have seen children acting in a movie? Anyone? You. Doesn't that blow your mind? I have directed movies. I'm a filmmaker, and it blows my mind how children can act their performances. It blows my mind because it is so difficult to work with smaller children. It is extremely difficult. And when you see a child acting so convincingly, I mean, where did they learn that? And the answer is they didn't. They can't possibly have. They haven't lived long enough to have the experience of being trained. So for me, that is mind blowing. It's incredible and admirable that people can be born with such talents. Let's move on. So we said the cinematography can be approached as an art form. It can also be approached as a science or a technique. And when we approach it as a science, when we're talking about science or technique, it is objective and precise. So that means that when we approach cinematography, there are things that you can learn. In cinematography, there are things that you need an innate talent for, but on the other hand, there are things you can learn. Cinematography is a science because it couldn't be possible. It would not exist if it were not for scientific advances. So when we look at cinematography, it it feeds from the arts, but it also feeds itself from science. What science? Well, in physical sciences, you know that there are different branches in the different sciences, and when you approach physics, you can there are fields that are more specialized, like for example, quantum physics or quantum mechanics, astronomy, cosmology. There's another one called optics. And what does optics deal with? Optic deals with light and the properties of light. So advances in the field of optics allowed for the invention of something called photography. And photography exists because there was something invented, a machine called a camera. So in addition to that, movies do not only record, cameras do not only record visuals or light, because what we see is light, but we're going to be talking about that in another lesson, right? What you see is light, visible light. But modern cameras also record sound. So these advances and the recording of visuals and sounds in the last 2 centuries or century and a half have nurtured cinematography. All right. Now, I also said that cinematography is a language. I mean, languages are important to communicate. They have been important since the dawn of time, since man learned how to speak. And one of the very first things that your parents tried to instill in you when you were a little baby, they would like talk to you. Why did they talk to you in the crib? And they were thrilled when they heard you like doing a little bit more than just gurgling, but trying to produce sound like saying "mama, papa," saying those fantastic words. They were thrilled out of their minds because you were acquiring a very important gift or skill, which is language. Languages allow us to communicate with our peers. And how do we get our information? Through language, whether it is spoken or whether it is written. So ask yourself, nowadays, in the 21st century, what uh, source do you get most information from? Is it from books? Is it from discourse or speech? Or is it from cinema, from images that have been recorded and shown to you? You answered this question to me in another lesson, in a previous lesson, and you all confessed what I already know. Cinematic information is the most trafficked type of information in the world nowadays. Very few people read, which is very sad and very limiting, and it is something that I challenge you to overcome. Uh, People talk a lot, but some people prefer to be quiet and just receive their information cinematically. So, how does that work? How does cinema work as a language? Well, in written language and literal language, we have letters, we have symbols that we decode and interpret as ideas. You see an LOVE, love, and that is connected to idea. Words are thoughts, words are ideas. And we connect them with others and create more complex ideas. And sometimes you write a sentence, and something as simple or as small as a comma can make the entire difference in a world in what we're saying. It can completely change the message. And that's how we communicate literally. How do we communicate visually, cinematically? It's different. It's not the same. But there is a grammar. There is a grammar. It's just not made of symbols and like commas and periods and question marks and letters. Uh, but there is such a thing as visual literacy, which is something that you're going to acquire in this course. Visual literacy is how to decode the language of cinema. Okay, talking about cinematic language, films speak to you. Cinematic language is like any other means of communication. It just has its own particular grammar. Um, we know that we must learn to read before we can attempt to enjoy or understand a short story or a poem. Uh, and we sometimes make the mistake that anyone can read a film. Read a film. Many people, almost anyone can watch a film, but to read the film, that means to understand it. That's a different story. That's a different story. I am sure that because of your lack of training in this field, sometimes you sat down, watch a movie, and many things that movie been trying to communicate to you, they flew over your head because you did not have the awareness that comes with being trained in cinematic language. One of the purposes of this course is to correct that. Uh, One very gratifying thing for me as a teacher in this course is hearing students that have told me, Mister, I used to watch films, but when I look at them now, it's not the same. It's different. Now I understand them better. And that's very gratifying because that's what we want for you to be able to watch a cinematic piece of work and understand it, and not just understand it and get more enjoyment from it, but also to look at much of this work uh, critically, with more critical eyes. Should I believe this? Should I not believe this? Should I accept this? Should I not accept it? How much of this is true? How much of this is not true? Uh, is this presenting ideas that represent objective reality or not? Because sometimes we don't have the tools to make this type of analysis, and it's very important that you have these tools. Because I think these tools protect you and help you engage better with the world around you. So we hope that you can watch movies and understand them better. Um, Talking about cinematic language, an education in language of film opens a greater potential meaning for the observer. That is you, because you're the observer. You're also going to become a producer. You're also going to be communicator in this language because you're going to make films, you're going to make movies. Um, the language of cinema, instead of using periods, as I said, in commas and hyphens and semicolons and letters, uses light, shadow, something called frame composition that has to do with how you put something in the frame. The frame is what you're seeing right now. Some of you are seeing me in inside a frame. Well, that framing is also part of the language. It communicates things. Camera angles means how you position a camera. That also communicates things. That's also a component of a cinematic language. As is color. Colors have meanings. Colors impact emotions. We're going to dedicate an entire lesson to that. And sound. We're also going to dedicate entire lessons to sound, to audio. Um, so, like in any other form of self expression, everyone has their own way of doing things. And that particular way of doing something is called style. We're going to be talking about style in the next lesson. Okay? And in our next meeting, Friday. The film language can be defined as all the techniques used by a filmmaker to tell a story on the screen. And what does that include? Well, instead of that including like periods and commas and capital letters or small letters and things like that, it includes a camera distance, camera angle, how the camera moves, how the film is edited, sound, again, light, shadow, color, all these components. These elements allow filmmakers to tell a story in a variety of ways, and ways that are very distinctive and that communicate a variety of things to you. The way that a filmmaker communicates the story, they tell the story, is called style. And style is something we're going to be talking about tomorrow. But let me give you, before I finish, a definition of film style. Style, remember, is essentially, in a very broad term, a particular way of doing things. And everybody has style. Style is something that separates us from the crowd and the measure that it is distinctive. Some people have styles that are very common, so they don't stand out. But some people have very distinctive styles. They have like very particular and attractive way of doing things, and that makes them pop out. That's why you have your particular performer or singer, for example. Maybe your favorite singer sings in a way that is very distinctive. When you hear that singer, it doesn't sound like everybody else. It sounds, you can hear the person say, that's this person or that person, because that's their particular way of doing things. This can be applied to anything, but it's also applied to film. So in film, cinematic style refers to a recognizable set of techniques used by filmmakers to give specific changes or values to their work. The same way that you hear a performer and you can identify them because of their style, because of the way, particular way they do things. Some filmmakers or directors have particular ways of expressing themselves cinematically. And it's also very recognizable. I mean, you can sit down and watch a movie and say, okay, this movie has to be done by Sam Raimi because he is so distinctive. Or in this movie, probably the director was Alfred Hitchcock or Steven Spielberg or Christopher Nolan, to name one of the modern uh, nowadays directors, right? So, guys, this is basically what I wanted to share with you today. The lesson, like always, is at the LMS. Um, Even though we're sharing this lesson through a different platform that is not the LMS that we have at College One, remember that next week we're going to fold back to College One, but we are in Zoom today. Another quick, you don't have a homework to do today. Just read the presentation and analyze it, go over it. We're going to continue delving more into it in the next lesson.